Hey YouTube, it's your girl Dr. J, and I am doing a video response for KuumbaHomeschool, who has a 5-year-old who is dyslexic. And I promised you that I would do a response, and what I'm going to talk about is some things that I think will be really beneficial in working with a child that is dyslexic. The first thing is that it's great that you were able to catch it really early. And there's two things that I'm going to talk about. One is remediation and the other is accommodation. Remediation is what are some things that you can do now that's going to be able to help him in his journey. And some of the biggest pieces of advice I have is starting with lowercase letters. A lot of times when you see letter recognition and letter things for kids, they really focus on uppercase letters. You want to focus on lowercase letters. The reason is because over 80% of the words that we encounter with reading, they're going to be lowercase. And so if you concentrate on lowercase, that's going to get him reading a lot faster than concentrating on uppercase letters. The only uppercase letters I would concentrate at all in right now is the letters in his first and last name, because when he writes his name, you want to make sure that he can write it grammatically correct. But other than those two letters, I would focus mainly on lowercase letters. Another thing that I would recommend is looking at introducing cursive. I know cursive writing tends to not be introduced until a little bit later unless you're following the Montessori method, but cursive writing is great for dyslexic children, and the reason is because the B and D are two of the most reversed letters for dyslexics, but that reversal goes completely away with cursive because they don't look anything alike in cursive. And so you really get a chance to do that. And also, it's very easy to distinguish between the D and the P in cursive rather than in print. So you want to maybe start to get him into writing a little bit of cursive. The other thing that you want to do is to start associating written words with manipulatives. And I know you had done that a little bit already, but one of the things that, the reason why this is important is because dyslexics tend to not read words letter for letter, and they tend to not read sentences word for word. And so what you want to do is take a card, like for instance, okay, I'll find this one, ran. Okay, so you would take a flashcard and ran, and you would help him pronounce it. Ran. Sam ran to Matt, ran. And then you take, little letter tiles. I have this little letter tile box, but you can, find free, movable alphabets online that you can print off or use any kind of letter tiles that you have. And then have him find, or you put out there the R, A, and N, and then have him put it in the correct order. So you point ran, and then point to ran there, because you want to start to train him to make sure that when he reads, he's reading letter for letter. The other thing is the introduction of letter sounds. A lot of times we are tempted to only teach some of the letter sounds, but with a child who is dyslexic, you want to teach all of the phonetic sounds very early. It is going to take a long time. It is going to be a much longer process than when you're dealing with a child that's not dyslexic, but it's going to be worth it. For instance, a lot of times when we're teaching children letter sounds, we'll say Y says yeah. But for the most part, when we're reading, unless Y is the beginning letter in a word, Y rarely makes the Y sound. Usually it makes the I or the E sound, like in cry, buy, baby. And so you want to let him know very early that Y says Y, Y says I, Y says E. And again, I know it's going to take a lot longer to teach phonics that way, but it's going to be so beneficial. Dyslexia is not something that goes away. We can remediate it so we can make the reading get better, and we can make the spelling get better, but it's going to take a long time. For us and a lot of other people that I know with dyslexic children, it generally takes about 2 years to get them really reading in any sort of way that shows any reading progress. About 2 years of intensive effort before they're reading, Bob books. And for spelling, you're looking probably at about 4 years before they're spelling in a way that is looking good at all. I actually really like Bob books. I recommend Bob books. When you buy Bob books, I would start with set 1, beginning reading. It's going to start with those consonant, vowel, consonant words. They do have a kindergarten sight reading book, but I actually wouldn't start with that because the words are more complex than in the first book. And they also come with flashcards, and I'm a big fan of flashcards for dyslexics, just because flashcards force you to recall, and practicing recall is what gets things into long-term memory. Another thing, I use flashcards a lot. I'm showing you some. We use Scholastic flashcards, and what I do with my kids, my twins still use these. They are 6. They're in the 1st grade right now, so I'm going into the 2nd grade, and there's about 120 cards per set, and we will go over the entire set at least 4 to 5 times a week. And I stay with that set until they're able to recall quickly all the words in that set. And I also use pop sight words, you know, level 1 find, and she and he and all those words in there. We'll go through this entire set. It's about 120 words in here, and we'll do the various levels. Most dyslexics have some sort of phonological awareness issues, and it definitely sounded like your son had some. I like these cards. They're from Super Duper Publications. This is a website that a lot of people who work with special children with special learning needs, they use these cards. We use them in our homeschool, and they're great. Like this one is on the deletion of phonemes, and it teaches the child to keep words in their mind and be able to manipulate them. For instance, you will just tell them, you actually say this to them. Say magnify, and then they say magnify. Now say it without the I, and then so they would say magnify, you know. And the reason is because you want to help them hold those phonemes in their mind. This one is on blending syllables. This one is on deletion of syllables. This one is on producing rhyming words. Dyslexics tend to struggle a bit with rhyming words. So, like this one says, tell me some words that rhyme with clock. And, you know, they would say block, rock, dock. You want them to be able to start to give you at least 3 or 4 rhyming words. It's going to take a long time. It's not going to be something that's easy. It's not going to be something that's quick. Another set of books I really like are by Brian Cleary, and these are sounds like reading. These are short. This one is on short vowel sounds. So it has stop, drop, flop, slop. So basically, on a page, you would have over here plum, drum, glum. And then on the other side, it'll say the plum on the drum is glum. So it's basically teaching them to once they can say the sound, you know, add, or then they can add cat and rat and sat with it. Another thing that I would have you do, you talked about he was having trouble producing rhyming sounds. What I would do is actually get a mirror and put that mirror in front of him and have him make the sounds so that he can see how his face looks. So, for instance, you sit him in front of the mirror. You'll say act, and have him look in the mirror while he says it, so he can see how his face looks. He can feel how his mouth feels when he says it. So you'll say act, and then say rat, and he would say rat, and then he would see, oh, my face does the same thing when I get to the act. So they're the same. Now say cat, cat, cat. And so he begins, even if he can't right now hear the rhyme, he will be able to feel it and see it. And so that's going to get him to where he needs to be in that. So really help him use his entire body for understanding what that phonological awareness that's not there. You want to help him get it in other ways. Another thing that I would recommend is going to go into that accommodation, and that is you want to separate reading and spelling from all other work. Right now he's young, and a lot of times we think, okay, I just got to get my child reading. But when your child is dyslexic, it's going to take a really long time to get them to reading. But the good thing is that dyslexia actually has its advantages. The dyslexic mind works very differently than minds that are not dyslexic. And so there are some things that he's going to get really well. Like you talked about him doing really well with puzzles and different things like that, that is an advantage of dyslexia. And so you want to start working with those advantages that it gives them, and accommodate the other things. So with my kids, when they're doing math, I will read all math word problems to them. I'll read directions to them because I don't want their reading to pull down their math. I want to let them excel in those things. Another thing that we do is audiobooks, listening to audiobooks. The dyslexia is not a comprehension problem. It is a problem with reading and spelling, but it has nothing to do with comprehension. In fact, research shows that dyslexics tend to have a little bit higher IQ on average than general population. So it's definitely not a comprehension understanding issue. So you want to take out the disability and keep the ability. So we use a lot of audiobooks in our homeschool. Well, I just let the kids, listen to books that they enjoy so they can still get the content and move on from there. Teaching typing. My kids do a lot of work online. And so we teach typing very early. First grade, my kids start learning how to type. They start to take formal typing lessons, just free stuff that we find online, second grade. And so I want them to be typing well by the third or fourth grade. So because that's going to give them that benefit where we're not going to wear them out with trying to write. We're not going to wear them out with trying to read. For instance, my eldest, who's going into fourth grade, he can read at grade level. He does not spell at all anywhere near grade level. But what happens is when he reads, he can tire easily from reading. So I'm not going to say, well, you can't do geometry, you can't do science, you can't do geography, you can't do any of these other things because you can't read. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tire him out. I want him to save his strength for the reading work where we're helping him to get better at it. But I take out reading, the need to read in all other areas. The reason why I do this is because accommodation is something that's going to be important. You want your child to get comfortable with accommodation because he's going to need it. It would be like saying, I'm going to make a child in a wheelchair use the stairs because that would be fair. No, we understand that it's not fair to make somebody who's in a wheelchair use the stairs. We have a ramp. That is an accommodation. Well, that's the same thing with dyslexia. We understand that a child that is dyslexic is going to have trouble reading. When we test them, if we're testing math, we don't care about reading at that point. So I'm going to read them their problems, and then they're going to give me the answer so I'll know how they're doing in math. And so you want to get comfortable with accommodation. You want him to be able to get good with the accommodations that are available, because when it comes time for, sitting for the ACT, SAT, that sort of stuff, you want to make sure that he knows how to utilize the accommodations and he's willing to accept the accommodations that are there. I have seen a lot of students with dyslexia or other sort of disabilities who don't get accommodation because they want to do it on their own, and they end up suffering when they don't need to. Another thing that I'm going to recommend is, and it's going to be probably some advice that you haven't heard before, but I would actually spend twice as much time every day working on his area of strength than on his areas of weakness. And so basically with us, because my kids struggle with reading and spelling, we work on reading and spelling every day. We'll be working on reading and spelling every day, probably all the way up through high school. But we spend twice as much time working on math, science, and engineering, because those are my kids' areas of strength. The reason is, if we spend, no matter how much time we spend on spelling, my kids will probably be, at best, average spellers. And so that's not going to get you anywhere in life being an average speller. Okay, but what happens is, if I spend the majority of our time, or twice as much time, getting them great in math and science and engineering, then people are going to say, oh my gosh, can you believe how good those kids are in math? Yeah, they don't spell too well, but boy, math. Rather than not spending the time getting them really good in their areas of strength, and then getting them to, level of acceptability in their areas of weakness, and going, okay, yeah, you can spell. Yay. Most people in the world spell better than you, but hey, you can spell. And so that's one of the things that you really want to start changing your mindset about it. Yes, reading is important. Yes, spelling is important. And I'm getting my kids to proficiency in those areas. But I need for them to take advantage of their areas of strength so that their area of weakness does not limit them in life and does not pull them down. There's a great book that I recommend called The Dyslexic Advantage, and it's by the Eides, E-I-D-E-S. Brock and I forget the other person's name, but it's a husband and wife duo that wrote the book, very well researched, and it talks about how even though dyslexics are about 10% of the population, they are a disproportionately high number of people who are exceptional, who are dyslexics. For instance, while about 10% of the population is dyslexic, about 30% of very successful entrepreneurs are dyslexic. While 10% of the population is dyslexic, a disproportionately high amount of engineers, architects, scientists, and mathematicians are dyslexic. And the reason is because they knew that they were going to struggle in reading, and they knew that they were struggling in spelling, and so they clung onto the things that they loved, and they got great in those areas. And so they found out, there's accommodations. You can hire an editor if you have trouble with spelling when you're publishing a scientific paper, and you can get audiobooks, and that's going to be fine. So you can still read the exact same books that everybody else is reading, but if you go ahead and take that area of strength and really work with it, then you can develop that into something that's great. And so that's the biggest thing that I would encourage, is that yes, you want to work on spelling, you want to work on reading, but it's going to be a long haul and a really long process. And so you want to make sure that you balance his day, because if all he has to, if he gets too bogged down with the remediation, it can make him feel like he's dumb. And dyslexics are not dumb. Dyslexics are not stupid. But if your whole day is spent just working on something that you suck at, that really is not motivating. But if you spend some good quality time getting better, even by very small measures, in things that you're not good at, but you also get some quality time to show how you're great, that really balances who you are as an individual. That's one of the things that's hard with people who are in like special education classes, is because everything is about what you are weak in. That's the benefit of homeschooling. We can have kids that are struggling in an area, they're disabled in one area, but we can show them how they shine in other areas, so they don't have to hold them back. So my daughter, who is my little math guru, she's 6, and she's finally getting her rhythm in reading. Not yet found her rhythm in spelling, but she's doing math 3 years ahead. My oldest, who's 8, he's doing, he found his rhythm in reading. He's reading at, or maybe even a little bit above grade level. He's spelling way below grade level. 2 years or more below grade level. But he's already doing pre-algebra. And so he doesn't walk around going, oh my gosh, I'm going into the 4th grade and I can't spell. That's not how his day, because yes, he knows he struggles with spelling. Yes, we work on spelling every single day. Yes, we work on reading with him every single day. But he knows when he sits down at the computer and he starts working on math, he's doing, math way beyond his grade level, and that excites him. When they're building their buildings and working on various projects and doing science experiments and involved in inventors contests, they get to see that they're a complete person. They get to see that there's more to them and to their life than just this struggle, just this disability. They're not defined by their disability. So the biggest advice that I would give you is, yes, work on the areas of struggle that he has. It's going to be a long road. He's not going to learn to read in a year. It may be 2, it may be 3, maybe 4 years. Spelling, it's going to be a long, hard road. He's going to have to do a lot of really, really, really hard work. Find out what he's great at and let him work on those things much, much more often than he works on his areas of struggle, because you want to balance him, and you want him to not, you don't ever want him to feel like he's stupid. You don't ever want him to feel like he's dumb. You don't ever want to feel like he's not functioning the way he should as an individual. So having him be great, absolutely great in his area of strength, will be the balance that he needs so that he doesn't get depressed. And it also allows you to determine how the world sees him as well, because my kids, the way that they present to the world doesn't first see their disability. The world first sees their ability, and it's like, oh my goodness, this kid is, yeah, this kid, did you guys see this kid do math? Or you guys see this, girl and what she can invent? Her spelling is crazy, but man, can she invent some cool stuff. As opposed to her working hard, or my son's working hard, and people just going, so what? You finally can spell the word fish. Woo. So it's really about managing them and their self-worth, and also managing what we show the world. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, definitely put them in the comments below, and I will respond. But I hope this helps. This is Dr. J, and I'm out. Bye-bye.